before we begin. This isn't typical horror. It's about something much quieter. What happens when someone knows what you've kept hidden? And in this story, that someone is a little girl. If you enjoy psychological stories like this, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin. She said it while she was coloring, not looking at me, not pausing, not doing anything strange at all. She was at the coffee table with a green crayon, drawing something that was supposed to be our dog and looked more like a chair with legs, and she said a name out loud, in the same tone she might have used to tell me she wanted juice. A name I have never told anyone, not my wife, not my brother, not a priest, not a therapist, not some drunk friend at 2 a.m. No one. The name exists in one place only. Attached to one sealed-off part of my life I have spent 15 years not discussing. My daughter said it. Then she switched to a blue crayon and kept drawing. By that point, it was already the 5th time. The others had all been right too. A father at a birthday party. My mother-in-law. A woman from our street with 2 lives under one face. A plumber who'd spent 19 years searching for a boy nobody else was still looking for. All of them true. So when Maya looked up at me that Thursday night and said mine, I was not surprised. I was terrified, but I was not surprised. Because by then, I had spent 3 months watching my 4-year-old move through our neighborhood like a child with a flashlight in a dark attic, casually finding things people had hidden years ago and illuminating them without understanding what she was doing. And once you know your daughter can do that, there comes a point when every quiet moment in the house starts to feel like waiting for your turn. My name is Daniel. My wife is Claire. We live outside Columbus, in the kind of suburb where every house looks like it was chosen from the same 4 templates, and every street curves in a way that makes delivery drivers hate you. I work in logistics. Claire is an occupational therapist. Our daughter Maya turned 4 in January. We have a dog named Buster, who is friendly, lazy, and has never once contributed meaningfully to anything. Nothing about our life was unusual. That's important. Because what happened didn't come out of grief or old family lore or some history of strange events. It did not rise out of an already haunted life. It entered something ordinary. And that is still the part I can't get over. It started the way the worst things often start, as something that looked exactly like nothing. Around the time Maya turned 4, she started doing a thing with names. It wasn't alarming at first. It was honestly kind of cute. She called the dog Gerald for a week. She referred to our neighbor's green sedan as the red car every single time she saw it. Once she called Claire Mama Dan, which made both of us laugh hard enough that Maya laughed too, even though she didn't know why. Her preschool teacher told us Maya was in a linguistic expansion phase, which sounded official enough that we accepted it without question. 4-year-olds are experimenting with labels, she said. They're figuring out how the world sorts itself. That made sense. If you'd met Maya then, you would not have noticed anything wrong. She was happy, loud when excited, clingy when tired, deeply opinionated about socks. She liked orange juice, hated naps, and had recently developed a habit of arranging her stuffed animals in very precise formations that she would defend with genuine moral outrage if anyone moved them. She was just a little kid. The first real incident happened on a Saturday morning in March. I was at the kitchen table with coffee, still half inside sleep. Maya came in dragging her blanket, climbed onto the chair across from me, and stared at me the way little kids do when they need you to register their presence before they decide what to do next. I said, "Morning, Bug." She said, "Morning, Crane." I looked up. She was already reaching for my mug. I laughed. "That's not my name." She kept reaching. "I know." I moved the mug out of range. She climbed down and wandered back into the living room. That was it. No stare, no change in voice, no eerie pause, just a wrong name. In a kitchen. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I forgot. About 3 weeks later, my brother called me because he'd found an old photo from college. We were talking about who was in it and where it was taken. And in the middle of the conversation, he said, "You're right there in the middle. You and Crane and those third-floor idiots." I remember sitting up straight in my chair. I said, "What did you say?" He repeated it, confused by my tone. "Crane? Marcus? The guy from your dorm?" I hadn't heard that name in 11 years. Crane wasn't mine. It belonged to a guy I knew during a period of my life I don't talk about. His real name was Marcus. Everyone called him Crane because of the way he walked. Long, folded, off balance, like his knees had been assembled in the wrong order. He wasn't a close friend exactly, more the center of a small orbit that I drifted into for a while, and then out of. I had not said his name in years. I had not thought about him in years. My daughter said it 3 weeks before my brother brought it up. I got off the phone and sat there looking at nothing. I told myself I must have said it in my sleep once, or during some half-forgotten conversation. Or maybe Maya had picked it up from something else, and my brain was forcing a pattern that wasn't there. I almost believed that. At the time, I thought it was a coincidence. Now, I think it was a warning. The second one was what should have convinced me. It happened at a birthday party in our backyard for Maya's friend Ellie. 8 kids, 4 sets of parents, juice boxes, butterfly cake, the usual suburban performance of everybody pretending this level of noise and sugar is sustainable. Ellie's father was there. His name was Tom. Nice enough guy, tall, reserved, always seemed mildly surprised to find himself in a social interaction. I was near the fence when I saw Maya walk up to him. She pointed at him and said with total certainty, "You're Martin." Tom laughed politely. "Nope, I'm Tom." Maya shook her head. "No," she said. "Martin when she's mad." Tom's smile disappeared. Not slowly, not a fade. Gone. Right then, his wife, Jenna, stepped up beside him and put a hand on his arm. A quiet hand. Not affectionate, not casual. It was the kind of touch people use in public when they are trying to communicate something private through skin. Maya looked at her, considered her face for a second, then said almost thoughtfully, "You know that one." Jenna took her hand off Tom's arm like Maya had burned her. Tom said, "Hey, sweetie, why don't you go play with the other kids?" His voice was too careful. Maya had already lost interest. She wandered away. I remember standing there with a paper plate in my hand, feeling stupidly embarrassed on her behalf. The way parents do when their kid says something weird, and you assume everybody else is just being gracious. Tom didn't look at me again for the rest of the party. Jenna was in and out of the house 3 separate times. I didn't understand any of it. 3 weeks later, Claire mentioned over dinner that Tom's middle name was Martin. She'd seen it on a homeowners association document. Just a passing fact. I looked at her and felt something cold move through me. I asked, trying to sound casual, "Did you know that before?" Claire shrugged. No. I asked if she knew whether Jenna ever called him that. Claire said, Why would she? I didn't answer. That night I lay awake, replaying the scene by the fence. Maya saying, Martin when she's mad. Jenna's hand on his arm. The look on both their faces. Not a child saying something random. A child surfacing something active and private. Something inside their marriage. That was the night I first had the thought I would have many more times later. I wish I had stopped her. Not because I thought she was doing anything wrong, because I was beginning to understand that every time she opened her mouth, she might take something sealed and make it public. And once something like that is out, there is no putting it back where it was. Claire's mother came in April for a long weekend. Her name is Patricia, but everybody calls her Tricia. She is warm, energetic, incapable of arriving empty-handed, and physically unable to occupy a room without reorganizing at least one part of it. This is how she loves people. Maya adores her. The morning after she arrived, I came downstairs and found the two of them eating cereal together at the kitchen table, having one of those fragmented child-grandparent conversations where only every fourth sentence seems to belong to the same topic. I started making coffee. Maya looked up at me and said, Grandma was Bonnie before. Tricia froze, not startled, not flinching, frozen, spoon in the air, milk dripping back into the bowl. Eyes on Maya. I said, Was she? Maya shrugged. Before she was this grandma. Then she lifted her bowl with both hands and drank the cereal milk. I waited until Maya went upstairs to ask Tricia about it. She didn't make me work for the answer. She sat there for a long moment, then said, When I was very little, my father's mother called me Bonnie. Nobody else did. After my parents split up, my mother moved us away, and I never heard it again. She looked down at the table. I haven't been Bonnie since I was 6. I asked whether Claire knew. She said no. I asked whether she'd ever said it in front of Maya. She gave me a look so flat it was almost offended. No. I called Claire while she was out running errands and told her what had happened. I could hear her trying to keep her voice level. She said, Maybe Mom mentioned it and forgot. She says she didn't. Claire was quiet for a second. Then she said, Let's talk later. We didn't. Not really. But something changed after that visit. Claire didn't become frightened exactly. Claire isn't built that way. What she became was attentive. She started watching Maya the way a person watches a stove after the burner has sputtered once for no reason. Still part of the house, still familiar, but not something you completely turn your back on. Up to that point, Maya had mostly been saying names. Then Sandra came. Sandra was a plumber who'd done work in the neighborhood for years. She came by in mid-May to deal with a pipe issue behind the downstairs bathroom. Competent, matter-of-fact, maybe in her late 50s. She had a way of moving through the house like she was there to solve a problem, not participate in a family. Maya was home that day because preschool was closed for some holiday I no longer remember. I was standing in the hallway while Sandra worked with the wall open. Maya was beside me, quiet for once, watching Sandra the way little kids watch adults perform mysterious practical tasks. Then Maya said very softly, She still checks the door. I looked down at her. What? Maya was still watching Sandra. At night, she said, She thinks he'll come back thinner. I felt my entire body go cold. Not because the sentence made sense, because it didn't, because it had the texture of something private. I said, Maya, what do you mean? She turned to me, annoyed at being interrupted. "The boy," she said. "The one she lost." Then, with a small frown, "He doesn't know the way." And she walked away. Sandra never heard any of it. I didn't tell her. I stood in that hallway with the drywall open and the smell of damp plaster in the air, and felt for the first time something very close to real fear. A week later, I told Claire exactly what Maya had said. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat down very slowly at the kitchen table. Then she said, "Sandra had a son." I didn't say anything, and Claire stared at the grain of the table while she spoke. "He disappeared when he was 16, before she moved here. I only know because someone mentioned it once at a school fundraiser. They never found him." She swallowed. "I heard she still files updates. Every year." I said, "Maya couldn't know that." Claire nodded once, but she wasn't nodding in agreement. She was nodding the way people nod when the last possible normal explanation has just failed, and they can feel the shape of that failure settling around them. That was the first time Claire looked afraid, not of Maya, of the fact that this was real. That night, she checked on Maya 3 separate times after bedtime. The third time, I followed her upstairs and found her standing in the doorway to Maya's room, just watching our daughter sleep. Maya's room was lit by the whale-shaped nightlight on her dresser. Her stuffed animals were arranged around her in one of her usual careful formations, all facing the bed like witnesses. Claire whispered, without turning around, "She looks exactly the same." I said, "She is." Claire said, "I know." Then, after a long pause, "That's the worst part." After Sandra, I started noticing things I hadn't let myself notice before. How Maya would sometimes stop in the middle of a room, like she was listening to something distant. How she'd look at a person for 1 second too long, not rudely, just thoughtfully. How often adults talked around children, as if children weren't full human beings capable of absorbing everything. I became careful. At pickup, at the grocery store, at family dinner, I started stepping in more, redirecting, picking Maya up when she wandered toward clusters of adults, moving conversations along. Claire noticed. One night she asked, "What are you going to do exactly? Keep her away from people forever?" I said, "No." But I didn't have another answer. Because what do you do with a 4-year-old who might casually dismantle somebody's life in the cereal aisle? We stopped inviting people over as much. We stopped lingering after preschool pickup. I began to understand how quickly a family can rearrange itself around a thing nobody wants to name. The strange part is, Maya remained completely herself through all of it. She still cried if her toast was cut wrong, still demanded the orange cup instead of the blue one, still insisted that Buster understood full sentences. Whatever was happening did not seem to cost her anything. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made it worse, because it meant the thing moving through our lives did not need thunder or trances or visible signs. It could travel through a child who asked for applesauce and refused socks, and sang nonsense songs in the bathtub. It could wear normal life, like skin. The annual neighborhood cookout happened at the end of May. If there was a point where this stopped being our private problem, it was there. The Hendersons hosted every year, folding tables in the driveway, coolers full of beer and soda, a grill going non-stop, kids running in packs until someone fell and had to be consoled with a popsicle. We went because not going would have been conspicuous. Claire made potato salad. Maya wore her watermelon dress. I remember all of that with painful clarity. The same way people remember tiny, stupid details from the hour before a car accident. For the first 40 minutes, everything was normal. Then I noticed Maya wasn't playing with the other kids anymore. She was standing in the middle of the yard with that faraway, slightly tilted look she got sometimes, and not trance-like, just focused on something none of the rest of us could see. Phil, a man from 2 streets over, crouched to talk to her. I didn't know him well. Broad shoulders, friendly voice. Moved into the neighborhood the previous fall. Before he could say whatever he meant to say, Maya smiled and said, "Hi, Kevin." Phil stood up too fast, not dramatically, but enough that it looked involuntary. His wife, who was near the drinks table, looked over immediately. She had heard. Phil didn't correct Maya. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me over Maya's head with a face so empty it was almost expressionless. Then turned and walked into the Hendersons' house without a word. His wife watched him go. Then she looked at Maya, then at me, and that look was the first moment I understood that some people already knew, or almost knew, or knew enough. I started toward Maya. I was too late. She had already drifted toward a small group by the fence. One of them was a woman I vaguely recognized from school pickup. Another was somebody's visiting sister. A third was an older man from the next block over whose name I never learned. The visiting sister smiled at Maya and said, "Hi there." Maya looked up at her and asked, very politely, "Which one do you use with him?" The woman's smile flickered. "What?" Maya pointed, not rudely, just directly, at the older man standing beside her. "Which one?" she repeated. "The old one or the new one?" Nobody in that group moved. I was close enough by then to see the older man's face drain of color. Not a metaphor, and I watched him become physically paler. The woman said, after too long, "I don't know what you mean." Maya considered that. Then she said, "Okay," and turned to the school pickup mother on the other side of the circle. Before I could reach her, Maya looked at that woman and said, "Your brother still uses your room." The woman made a sound, not a word, just a small sound, like the body had gotten ahead of speech. Everything around us changed at once. Not noise, not drama, pressure. The school pickup mother took a step back. The visiting sister put a hand over her mouth. The older man looked down at the ground, like there was suddenly something there he needed to examine. And nearby, with the instinct people have for trouble before they understand it, conversations began to thin out. Faces turned toward us. Then away. I picked Maya up. She protested immediately. "I wasn't done," I said too sharply. "We are leaving." That got attention. Heads turned. Claire was already moving toward us from the food table. She had seen enough. As she reached us, a little boy from Maya's preschool ran up and tugged on Claire's sleeve, asking whether Maya could still play tag. Before Claire could answer, his mother crossed the yard fast enough to look rude, grabbed his wrist, and said, "We're going home." She didn't look at us when she said it. She just pulled him away. That was the moment. More than anything Maya said. Not the names, the reaction. A parent removing her child from mine. Like proximity itself had become unsafe. Claire's face changed. Not panic, not humiliation. Recognition. The kind that arrives when something you've been trying not to believe finally stands up in public and becomes impossible to misread. We left in under 2 minutes. No goodbyes, really. just a handful of unfinished gestures, and a lot of people suddenly interested in their food. On the walk home, Maya kept twisting in my arms to look back at the street. Then she said, in that same casual tone, "They don't like it when the doors open." Claire stumbled. Actually stumbled. I stopped walking. "Maya," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm sleepy." That was all. At home, while Maya was upstairs changing, Claire stood at the sink with both hands flat on the counter and said, "She cannot do that at school." I said, "I know." "She cannot do that in public." "I know." Claire turned and looked at me. "No, Daniel, I need you to hear me. We are past weird. We are past private. They are going to start talking." I said nothing. Because she was right. Our daughter had just walked into a neighborhood cookout and, in the space of maybe 4 minutes, opened 3 sealed rooms in 3 different adults. Maybe more. Maybe I only heard the ones nearest me. And from that moment on, I knew every interaction we had on that street would be divided into before and after. After the cookout, the house changed. Not physically, but the air in it did. Claire and I didn't fight. I almost wish we had. Fighting at least gives the fear somewhere to go. What we did instead was become careful with each other. We moved around the thing. I started wondering what Claire was hiding. Not because I thought she was deceitful, because by then, I understood that everybody has something. An old name, an old self, a room inside themselves they've painted over. And once you start seeing other people's concealed rooms yanked open one after another, you begin to feel your own walls from the inside. You notice every seam. I could feel Claire doing the same with me. Neither of us said it aloud. At night, I lay awake listening to the white noise machine in Maya's room and thinking about scale, about radius, about reach. Was it random? Was it proximity? Did Maya need to look at someone? Did she know beforehand, or only in the moment? The questions were useless. I asked them anyway. One Tuesday morning at breakfast, Maya pointed at the empty chair beside me and said, "He sat there too." I nearly dropped my coffee. Claire looked at me. "Who?" Maya was already eating blueberries. Claire asked again, more gently, "Who sat there, sweetie?" Maya frowned, as if the question were silly. "The tall one," she said. "Daddy knows." Then she went back to her cereal. Claire and I did not speak for the rest of breakfast. Maybe Maya meant Crane. Maybe she meant someone else. Maybe she just meant a delivery driver. Or my brother once. Or nothing at all. Once your nervous system has been trained for months to hear every one of your daughter's sentences as potentially catastrophic, ambiguity is not calming. It is gasoline. That afternoon, Claire texted me from work. "We need to talk tonight." We didn't. We sat in the living room after Maya went to sleep, both of us exhausted, neither of us willing to be the first one to say the true thing. The talk we needed kept not happening, and that became its own form of damage. It was a Thursday night just after dinner when Maya said my name. Not my real name, not Daniel, the other one. Claire was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. I was on the couch with my laptop open, pretending to answer emails. Maya was at the coffee table drawing, fully absorbed, tongue against the corner of her mouth, the way she did when concentrating. The room was ordinary in every possible way. Television off, dishwater running, the dog asleep under the side table. She reached for a blue crayon, then she looked up, directly at me, and said it. One word. That was all. No smile, No emphasis, no theatrical pause, just the name, spoken with mild certainty, as if she had finally found the correct label for something and was pleased to have solved it. The first thing that happened was not emotional. It was physical. Now my hearing narrowed. That is the only way I know to describe it. The room didn't go silent. It got far away. The water in the kitchen sounded like it was happening outside the house. Maya's crayon on the paper made a dry, scratching sound so loud it seemed impossible Claire couldn't hear it too. My hands went cold. Then hot. Then cold again. I remember looking at Maya and having the impossible thought that she could not actually be small enough to fit in that chair. Something in my mind could not reconcile the size of her body with the scale of what she had just done. She lowered her head and kept coloring. The dog snored once in his sleep. Claire called from the kitchen. "What did you say?" Maya answered. "Nothing." I stood up. Not quickly, like a person in a hospital corridor, receiving instructions they haven't fully understood. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of our bed in the dark. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. I'm not going to tell you the name she used. I have decided that. But I will tell you what made it unbearable. Not just that it was accurate, that it was precise, that it belonged not to some broad chapter of my life, but to one hidden point inside it. A thing with edges, a thing I had built my adult self around not revisiting. If she had said something vague, I might have survived it better. But she didn't. She said the one thing that meant there was no distance left between the life I lived now and the life I had buried. And because she said it casually, because she said it with no sense of consequence at all, I understood. In one horrible instant, every expression I had seen from every other adult she'd named. Tom by the fence, Trisha with her spoon in the air, Phil walking into the house, the school pickup mother stepping backward. It is not being known that destroys you. People can survive being known. It is being known by accident, being turned into information, being reduced, in the mouth of a child, to the truest label on the box. That is what breaks something in you. Claire came upstairs a few minutes later. She stood in the doorway and asked if I was okay. I said yes. Too fast. She stayed there a second too long, then left. I did not sleep. At some point after midnight, I went into Maya's room and stood over her bed. She was on her stomach, one arm under the pillow, hair stuck to one cheek with sweat. Her stuffed animals were lined up around the mattress in one of her rigid little arrangements, all facing inward. I remember thinking, she looks protected. And the second thought came right after it. From what? I left before dawn, packed a duffel bag in the dark, left a note on the counter. Need a few days. I'm okay. I'm sorry. I drove 40 minutes out to a motel off the highway where the hallways smelled like carpet cleaner and old air conditioning. The curtains didn't fully close. The vending machine on my floor had one cracked row of peanut M&Ms and 3 bottles of orange soda. I stayed 2 nights. Mostly, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about Maya saying the name. I thought about how long she'd been reading me, without my knowing it. I thought about the others, the things she'd surfaced in other people. Names, griefs, discarded selves, old doors that were supposed to stay shut. And I thought about Claire, not in the general sense. Very specifically, whether Maya had ever done it to her, whether Claire had heard something from our daughter and chosen not to tell me. Once you know this kind of thing can happen inside your house, Silence stops being empty. Silence starts looking occupied. Claire called twice the first day. I let both calls go to voicemail. I listened to the second voicemail 3 times before deleting it. She didn't sound angry. That would have been easier. She sounded tired. On the second evening, I called her back. She answered on the first ring. I said I was okay. I said I needed another night. I said I was sorry. Claire was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Maya said something to me too." Everything in my body tightened. I sat up on the motel bed. I said, "When?" "Yesterday morning." I waited. Claire said, "I'm not telling you what it was." I closed my eyes, and not because I was angry, because I understood, completely. I said, "Okay." Claire said, "Do you understand why I'm not telling you?" "Yes." Another pause. Then she said, "Come home tomorrow." Not a plea, not a command, a statement made by someone too tired to add emotion to it. I came home the next morning. The house looked exactly the same. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt obscene. How can a place contain something like that and still look normal from the curb? Claire was at the kitchen table when I came in, coffee in front of her, untouched. Maya was in the living room singing to herself while she built something with magnetic tiles. When she heard the door, she ran to me. "Daddy!" I picked her up automatically. She pressed her face against my neck. Warm, heavy, fully real. Her hair smelled like the lavender shampoo we use. She wrapped her arms around me and held on with the unthinking trust children have, when they still believe your comings and goings are weather, not moral action. Then she leaned back, touched my cheek, and studied my face. I felt panic rise so suddenly it almost made me drop her, but she just said, "You look tired." I laughed once. It came out wrong. "Yeah," I said. "I am." She nodded like that made perfect sense, wriggled to be put down, and ran back to her tiles. I stood there for a second too long. Claire said, "Sit down." So I did. We sat across from each other at the same table where Maya ate cereal, where bills got sorted, where ordinary life kept trying to continue around us. Claire looked at her coffee. Then she said, "I think this is the part that will ruin us if we let it." I didn't answer. She said, "Not Maya, this." Still looking at the cup. The not asking, the imagining, the filling in the blanks with the worst possible version of each other. I said, "Do you want to tell me?" She looked up. "No." And because that was fair, because it mirrored me too precisely to resent, I said, "Neither do I." Claire nodded once. We sat in silence while Maya hummed to herself in the other room. Then Claire said something that I still think about all the time. She said, "I don't think she reveals what matters most." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Claire glanced toward the living room to make sure Maya was out of earshot. "I think she reveals what still has power." I didn't say anything. Claire said, "There are things in a person's life they survive, and then there are things that keep living with them. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's what she sees. I have no idea whether that is true. But when she said it, something in me recognized the shape of it, because the name Maya used for me was not attached to the worst thing I'd ever done. It was attached to the thing that still had a room inside me. In the weeks after I came home, Maya stopped. Or at least, she stopped where we could hear. No more hidden names. No more impossible facts over breakfast. No more quiet little detonations in grocery store parking lots, or front yards, or kitchen tables. She went back to being 4. Summer arrived. The neighborhood pretended nothing had happened. A few families on our street became politely distant. One mother from preschool stopped making eye contact at pickup. Phil and his wife listed their house in July and moved before Labor Day. Maybe because of Maya, maybe not. Once you start living inside this kind of thing, causality becomes slippery. Claire and I did what adults do when their marriage has been altered in a way too subtle to explain to anyone else. We continued. School forms, meal planning, contractors, laundry. But beneath it all was this new shape neither of us could stop feeling. We both knew the other had been named. We both knew the other was carrying something alive enough to be seen. And we both knew a 4-year-old had walked through our house for one spring and turned on lights in rooms we had each assumed belonged only to us. We never asked each other what she said. Not once. I used to think that was restraint, maybe even kindness. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe it was fear. Maybe we both understood that whatever existed between us before had depended, at least partly, on the mercy of ordinary concealment, on the fact that most people are never fully translated. Maybe marriage depends more than anyone wants to admit on the existence of interior rooms you agree not to force open. Maya did not agree to that. She was 4. She didn't understand anything she was doing, and it didn't matter. It's been months now. Maya is in kindergarten. She has 3 best friends whose names change depending on the day, and a fierce opinion about which crayons are for real coloring versus for baby work. She still hates socks. She still arranges her stuffed animals in exact formations before bed. Claire and I are still in the house, still married. Technically, still kind to each other, still careful. Sometimes the old version of us returns for an hour at a time. In the car, folding laundry, standing in the kitchen deciding what to do about dinner. Then one of us goes quiet for no obvious reason, and it's back again, that invisible thing between us, heavy as furniture. A few nights ago, I was helping Maya clean her room before bed. She was putting her stuffed animals in place on the rug with solemn concentration. Bear first, and then rabbit, then the small elephant with the torn ear, all facing the same direction. I asked, mostly to hear something normal. Why do they always have to stand like that? Maya didn't look up. So they can watch the door, she said. I felt something cold move through me. I said carefully, watch for what? Maya set the elephant down, adjusted its trunk, and finally looked at me. For when the names come back. Then she smiled. Not a scary smile. Just a child smiling, because she was proud of her arrangement. And she climbed into bed and held her arms up for me to tuck her in. I did. I kissed her forehead, turned on the whale-shaped nightlight, and as I stepped out into the hallway, I looked back once. Maya was already half asleep. The stuffed animals were lined up beside the bed, all facing the bedroom door, in perfect stillness, watching it, as if they knew something in this house might one day want to come through.